So today we're answering the question, can an iPhone 16 be used as a secondary camera angle for your video projects? Let's get into it. So the reason why this question came about is because I was doing a one-on-one with the creator and she asked, instead of buying a whole new camera, could she use her iPhone 16 as another camera angle when she's doing a lot of her video projects? Which made me wonder if I could use the iPhone 16 to match my main camera, which was the Sony Fx3. So we decided to put it to the test. Now, most times when you see iPhones being used to shoot films, they're super rigged with expensive and crazy budgets. But in this video, we decided to keep it as simple as possible. So in order to really treat it like a documentary, we lit an interview style set so we can use the iPhone 16 Pro in a real life scenario. We had the Sony Fx3 positioned as our A camera directly in front of him, getting a wide shot, and we had the iPhone 16 Pro as our B camera positioned 45 degrees from him, getting our second angle. After we had everything lit and in place for the interview, we decided to focus on settings. So we set everything the way we wanted for our main camera, which was on a Sony Fx3. And then we used the Blackmagic app to have full control over our settings on the iPhone 16. Now, the only difference between these two cameras was that the Sony Fx3 had an ND filter, while the iPhone 16 Pro did not. But we'll talk about that a little bit more later in the video. So the main settings we changed to match the Fx3 were our white balance, which was 4800. Our frames per second was 24 frames per second. The ISO was 200. Our tint we moved to 0, and our shutter speed was the 50th of a second. The focal length options was 15mm, 24mm, 48mm, and 120mm. We wanted to test the 120 focal length just to see what it would look like, to see what the detail was on a closer focal length, and to just get a different angle from what our Fx3 was getting. Now, there's two things that you want to focus on before you even get to shooting. One, on the actual phone, you want to make sure that the log is turned on, because the whole point of this is to make sure that we can color the way we want and have full control over post-production. The second thing is, when you get into the Blackmagic app, you want to make sure that the color space is Apple Log HDR. Again, we're trying to shoot log. They even have the option to turn Gamma Assist on, so you can actually monitor your color and your lighting while you're on set. So one thing I noticed with the iPhone 16 was the color rendering. Right off the bat, the thing that caught my attention was the gradient from our backdrop. You don't really see that at all on the iPhone 16, which made me wonder, how is the color render when it comes to the iPhone 16 Pro? Once I started getting even deeper in my color, I just noticed that every Rec. 709 LUT that I was finding overly saturated the log. So the biggest thing for me was trying to find a really good Rec. 709 foundational LUT, because I think once your foundation is strong, you can go either way when it comes to color. Now, if you get a really bad Rec. 709 foundational LUT, you have to do more work in post. Now, what I was noticing was a lot of the Rec. 709s that I was finding were doing the same thing, which was overly saturating the image. And the four that I decided to focus on was Tyler Stallman's, Apple's Rec. 709 LUT directly from their website, as well as Donna Didit's Rec. 709, and then randomly a random LUT that somebody told me on Threads called The One. It's an ARRI LUT, so it tries to get your iPhone footage as close to looking like an ARRI as possible. Now, the reason why I actually really like the ARRI LUT, is because I felt like it didn't overly saturate the minute you put it on there. It really just dialed in on a skin tone, and I felt like that was a good foundational introduction to add upon when it came to me, going into color grading. And so I think after doing a lot of this work, you really do want to find a good foundational Rec. 709. And I even added a color matte to get the gradient that we saw in a Sony Fx3 to make it even more comparable and make it look just as much like the Sony Fx3, so people really wouldn't know unless they really were like pixel peeping or really just trying to figure out what the differences were. Not only did we have the iPhone 16 getting a completely different camera angle, but we also decided to put them side by side, getting a similar angle, because sometimes it is hard to tell the difference or similarities between the two when there's two different angles. So we decided to put them side by side just to dial in even more on what the differences could be, or if there was any. And to make it even more equal, we did MacGyver and hold up an ND filter over the iPhone lens, just because the Sony Fx3 also had an ND filter. As you can see, again, the gradients are very different as far as the backdrops. The Fx3 has this nice fall off, and the iPhone, all the colors of the backdrop just kind of blends in together. To me, there's more texture on the shirt and the jeans of the FX3. Although on the iPhone 16 Pro, I do think that the colors pop. I think there's more texture on the Sony FX3. It's weird to explain, but if you look at the shirt and the face, it feels like the colors blend in a little bit more, even though they pop on the iPhone 16. But if you look at the Sony FX3, each individual color like has texture, and even the overall shirt has a little bit more texture. The face, from the highlights to the shadows, have a little bit more texture. I think the roll off overall is just better on the Sony FX3 than it is on the iPhone 16 Pro. But then also I think the shadows are a lot harsher on the iPhone 16 Pro than they are the FX3. I just think overall this like smoother highlight roll off, or this smoother roll off in general of colors, and how light hits the iPhone, it doesn't do as well as it does on the Sony FX3, which is fine because of course you're comparing a cinema camera to an iPhone. So I don't expect it to be overly great. After I did all the color correction I needed to do, which was a lot, the iPhone 16 Pro actually came out looking good and very close to the Sony FX3. Like honestly, if you were just looking, especially on something like YouTube or something like that, you really wouldn't be able to tell a difference. Like a normal, regular person wouldn't really care about the difference. So my thoughts overall on if the iPhone 16 can be used as a secondary camera to your main camera, I think it can. Whether your main camera is a Sony FX3 or Blackmagic, a Nikon, a Lumix, whatever that may be, I think there are ways to get the iPhone 16 Pro to match up to your camera. Now, if you are somebody who is not comfortable in the coloring space or the post-production workflow, I wouldn't recommend this as a solution, because that is where the iPhone 16 Pro really gets to shine, is if you really know what you're doing and really know how to bring out what you need to bring out to match it to the camera that you need it to match to. If you do not know how to do that, or if you don't like the tedious aspect of post-production, the whole process, I wouldn't recommend it. Now, I personally think, and from what I gather, it may be better to underexpose the iPhone 16 Pro than it is to overexpose. And the reason why is, even on certain little tidbits where we had the ND up in front of the iPhone, or, you know, we were just a little underexposed, I saw a little bit more detail retained than I did when the exposure was a little higher. And so maybe if you underexpose, you can retain your detail and your information a little better. All of this is subjective. These are just what I found, and I try to do extensive testing in post-production, because at the end of the day, you can go and shoot and create your settings, but it really doesn't come to life until you get into post-production and you really start trying to color to match it. The reason why people use the same cameras when they are shooting with multiple cameras is because of the color science. The closer the color science are to both cameras, the less work that you have to do in post. So that's just something to think about when you are trying to use it as a B camera. Can it be used? Yes. Is it gonna take a lot of work? Yes. So if you guys have any questions, let me know down below in the comments. Thank you guys so much for watching. I love you all. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe, of course, to my YouTube channel, and I'll see you all in the next video. Bye.